Hi, I'm John Stamos' overweight stunt double, and welcome to Alchemy and Chemistry, Part 12. In today's episode, I want to revisit spagyrics, and I want to show you here in my little kitchen lab area kind of some of the stuff I've been working on. I had built a insect repellent, and using purple horse mint and a whole bunch of other essential oils and herbs, and this was put into a mixture of glycerin and alcohol, and I wanted to transfer that tincture into an oil base instead of an alcohol base. So here's how I did that. By putting coconut oil, you see the layer stratification of the layers here? So you put coconut oil in the tincture mixture and it'll float to the top. And then, so at the bottom what you see is a mixture of essential oils, glycerin, and alcohol, which is heavier than the oil. You can then put this mixture into a pan and boil it, and you'll get the vapors from the alcohol carrying the oils up through the base oil and sort of transferring the oils that way. It's a little easier than doing a distillation. You want to use a double boiler for safety and to keep the temperature down on the glass, and you want to take the lid off, of course. And you can see here that they will emulsify, but they'll settle back out in an hour or two. So that was an insect repellent I used for chiggers and mosquitoes, and oil base seemed to last longer than the alcohol. It sticks to your skin better. Now these little sample vials here and these laboratory looking items here, this graduated cylinder and the round bottom flask, that is actually Halloween decorations of all things. I found these at Michael's with my girlfriend there at Michael's, the hobby store. And it turns out these are accurately marked. But I wouldn't trust them for heating, maybe any temperature less than boiling water. I wouldn't put a direct flame to it because it's not Pyrex. So that's pretty cool. There's a tip for you if you want a little glassware. I've in the last video on spagyrics, I noticed that was a popular video, right? And I wanted to show you a little bit more about spagyrics. Here we have calcinated ashes, and this is from echinacea root and the body of the plant as well. It was calcinated just in an outdoor cooker in this pan here, and that was done under the astrological sign of Aries. And I will get to that in a minute. I wanted to discuss astrology in this video as well, and astronomy, and what is pseudoscience versus tradition versus actual factual effect of planetary bodies on chemistry processes. So when you start off with a tincture, like for example, here's an echinacea tincture. It's a full body. You use the full body of the plant. You mix it with ethanol. You can see it's nice and green. It contains the chlorophyll. Now you can get the green out by putting vinegar in there or letting it heat a little bit, but the heat and vinegar could also affect the chemistry, so you have to be aware of that. But it'll change colors to a brown or golden red kind of color over time because the chlorophyll contains magnesium, and when you mix certain things with it or heat it, the magnesium drops out. It changes the color of the chlorophyll, just like the way plants do during the fall. So if you ever need to get magnesium in your diet, eat leafy green vegetables. This is rainwater. I just captured this today, and I want to mix this with the calcinated ashes here, and I'll probably, oh cool, let this, well that was cool. Let that digest for a few days, and then I'll heat it and to make sure any germs are killed. And ultimately what I'm going to get from this mixture is a salt that will get added back into the original tincture. The original tincture that this came from is a root extract, and it turned out very, very well. This is the root extract that actually belongs to what I just showed you there, and it's a very good for sore throats. It's going to be an excellent medicine. It came out exceptionally strong because of when I harvested the plant, which was the first new moon in June around 11 p.m. So ultimately, this mixture here will be processed until I can get a white salt out of it. That white salt will then be added back to the original root extract that was made with alcohol and the root of the plant. That was a nighttime harvest. The green one I showed you over here is the same type of plant, Echinacea. It'll be a daytime harvest, and I'll do a little bit different process with it. It'll be a little different color because I didn't extract the root. I extracted from the whole plant, and we'll see if that creates a different effect or stronger or weaker, etc. So those calcinated ashes, what they look like before you calcinate them is just dry fibrous material. This is actually from horse mint, and I haven't calcinated that yet, and I may not calcinate that. So that gives you some pretty good ideas of some of the tinctures and things I've been working on here. Hope I didn't go too fast. We'll slow it down in other parts of the video. I've got this, which I'll use. This is tannins from chestnut. It's got a nice reddish brown color. I plan on using that. Let's see if I can get, there you go. You can see it's a nice reddish brown. I plan on using those to stain deer's hide I got from a friend of mine in Arkansas. So, handful of things there, handful of things. Oh, and I have a kava extract. Kava, as you know, is a root from Hawaii, and this extract, kava doesn't really, it mixes with alcohol, but you don't want to consume it with alcohol because it'd be hard on your liver. So what I plan on doing with this one is calcinating the pulp you see down there at the bottom, and strengthening the tincture, and then letting it evaporate so that it's not too high in alcohol content for the dosage. Anyways, that should be a very strong kava tincture. And anyway, that's good for now on this. Let's talk a little bit about the effect of astrology and astronomy on the tinctures, and I'll do that in just a moment. Okay, let's talk for a moment about the effects of astrology and astronomy and astrological bodies on the chemical processes and the plants themselves. Many people consider that all to be pseudoscience, but I don't think that's the case at all. However, I think some of it is in fact a stretch or some kind of traditional thing from the past that is not entirely necessary. Let's start off with examples of the most obvious. Does your position and the position of plants, the geographical location of plants and chemistry on planet Earth, affect the chemistry? So your position, the position of your body or the plant's body relative to the position of the globe. Does your geographic location affect the chemistry? And the answer is yes. Undoubtedly, because the climate and sun patterns in Alaska and soil conditions in Alaska are far different from that in Hawaii, which are also far different from the conditions inside of a volcano or under the surface of the ocean. So absolutely, your position with respect to planet Earth affects the chemistry of plants and also chemical processes. What about the next large item in the sky? The sun. Does it affect chemistry? Absolutely. Some chemicals are photosensitive, and relative to the day or night, that changes also how plants behave, whether they produce certain chemicals during the daytime because of how they're energized from the sun. So yes, absolutely, the sun affects chemistry. What about the moon? Does the moon affect chemistry? Well, the moon is capable of shifting the level of the ocean by several feet, So yes, there's a definite gravitational effect, and the light from the moon on a full moon affects animals and plants in different ways. Some plants actually bloom at night, and those will be affected by the moon. So, for example, a plant that has its chemistry in the root of the plant, I would expect it to be more potent at night during certain lunar conditions when the energy of the plant and the fluids of the plant are pulled down into the root. Whereas another plant that has its chemistry in the fruit or the flower might actually be more potent during the daytime. So yes, the moon, the sun, and the earth, all its relative positions definitely affect plants and definitely affect animals and chemistry as well. Where it gets a little bit nebulous is when you incorporate the concept of planetary effects. So Mercury, for example, which was just in retrograde, Mars, Saturn, there were 7 ancient planets that were noticed, and each one has a corresponding day of the week and a corresponding deity assigned to it. Well, these planets could affect chemistry, but it's a little bit harder to prove that. You would have to consider the effect of the psychology of the person that's doing the work and whether they see the planets in their vision and consider it to be a sign of good fortune or not. But you also could have some scientific effect from these planets. For example, their proximity could throw off certain forms of radiation, certain forms of gravitational effect, and very subtle effects, but they could affect chemical processes. One such study was done, I believe it was in the 30s. It's been a long time, and I can't pronounce the fellow's name, but I'll find it later in this video for you. And what he did was he took metals and put them in aqueous solution, so like lead, but not just metallic lead, rather a salt of lead that would be dissolved in water, and a salt of iron, and different things that could be dissolved into fluid form, and found that when metals were in fluid form, they were affected by certain planets. He found that the crystalline patterns of these salts were affected by Saturn and by Mars, and he published a study on it. So it seems possible. I think that study should be revisited to see if there's any truthful effect to it. Now, the last and most nebulous is going to be the constellations, Leo, Virgo, and whether they would have an effect on chemistry. So that's very, very far away. The gravitational effects, the radiation effects, very far away. But, hey, the ancients swore by it, so maybe it does have some effect, but it would be very hard to prove in any scientific way. Anyway, let's take a look at the Spagyrics book, and we can show some of the older traditions. And then I want to show you a newer method that I sort of came up with for determining the effect of planetary bodies on your work. So, here we have the old Spagyrics book.